on Jerusalem Dateline. This week on Jerusalem Dateline, America elects Donald Trump as its 45th president. We'll analyze what this means for Israel and the Middle East. Plus, a look at what can be done for persecuted Christians in the region, more than 2 years after ISIS forced thousands to flee. And a look at Israel's latest effort to chronicle the ancient stones of the Jewish homeland. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. President-elect Donald Trump's victory surprised and pleased many Israelis, as much as it did some Americans. Here's a reaction from Israeli leaders, analysts, and the view from people on the street. Calling Trump his friend and a supporter of Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulated the new president.
Over the years, you've expressed your support consistently, and I deeply appreciate it. I look forward to working with you to advance security, prosperity, and peace. And I'm confident that the two of us, working closely together, will bring the great alliance between our two countries to even greater heights.
Netanyahu and Trump spoke by phone, and Trump invited the Israeli leader to meet him in the U.S. at the first opportunity. U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro also gave a bright outlook for U.S.-Israel relations.
The new administration will inherit a great deal of continuity and a great deal of achievement in the U.S.-Israel partnership, that it has a security dimension with all of the assistance we provide Israel and all of the joint agreements on technology development.
Israelis, like many others around the world, believe the polls that Hillary Clinton would be the next president of the United States.
There are a lot of people in the Middle East stunned at this moment and trying to process, what does this new world look like?
Author and Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg told CBN News the incoming vice president will help ease any uncertainty.
I think most Middle Eastern experts, government officials, aren't sure how to process this new moment because it was so unexpected to them. But if Mr. Trump begins to build a team like Governor Pence, this could be very healthy for the region.
Rosenberg said a national security team of experienced conservatives would help clarify the U.S. position in the Middle East.
Are we withdrawing, or are we making choices to strengthen our alliances and defeat radical Islamic, apocalyptic Islamic forces like ISIS?
In Tel Aviv, Israelis had mixed reactions to the election, but all said they believed Trump would be better for Israel.
It's really hard to have an opinion when everything you see is the media, and I think that people are very affected by it. I also heard people in Israel say that Trump will be good for Israel, so I can only hope.
I'm in shock. It even scares me. And yet I think the connection will be good between the new government and Israel.
I'm not happy because I actually preferred Clinton, and yet from a policy standpoint, I think Trump has interests and good connections. From an economic standpoint, I think he also wants this friendship with Israel.
I'm very happy about the Trump result.
Why is that?
Because he's a strong man. He's looked at the situation in the United States like a business problem, which has to be sorted out. And I think he's got the ability to try and do that.
As the election dust settles and the U.S. grapples with the results, Israel and the rest of the Middle East are waiting to see just what Trump's campaign rhetoric will mean in the region. On election night, CBN founder Pat Robertson, CBN senior editor John Waggy, and Jay Sekulow, the head of the American Center for Law and Justice, discuss how the election will affect some of the vital issues facing Israel, from the declaration of a Palestinian state to the future of Jerusalem.
We're establishing right now at the ACLJ a 100-day agenda that we're going to submit to the president-elect and to Congress to say this is what we think is realistic within this 100-day period and work there. And then watch any executive orders between now and the end of the year, and also watch an attempt by the Obama administration at the United Nations to call for the pre-67 borders for Israel. I expect that will go to the Security Council, and it may well be that the U.S. will not veto it. In fact, I pretty much know they will not veto it. So we've got a real fight on that front, too.
Thank you, Jay. John, what do you think? We're talking about Israel. The idea of them having a two-state solution imposed by the United Nations is anathema to Israel.
Israel is probably breathing a sigh of relief right now that you know, the pressure, all that pressure of 8 years of the Obama administration is off, and frankly, some pressure from the Bush administration through the State Department. It'll be interesting to see if the Trump administration launches reform of the State Department. One thing that they proposed on Israel, his top advisor, who may become the U.S. ambassador to Israel, is David Friedman. He, just last week, proposed moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and also recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Those are just two of the things he's recommended.
Well, you know, Congress voted that, and the State Department
in 1995 they voted that.
It's been hanging that long. We have the land, we have everything ready to move, and they said, no, the capital of Israel is Tel Aviv. That is insane.
But that's State Department entrenched policy, Republican and Democrat. The bureaucrats, they persist in keeping that going, and they'll continue to do it. And so he's going to have a battle on his hands for that. Not to mention the upset that could be caused within the Middle East over that issue. I mean, you're talking some serious inflammatory kind of moves there. But it's, many people believe, especially Christians, believe it's the right move.
And it's going to take extraordinary wisdom. So pray for the leaders and pray for our president.
Donald Trump will need prayer not only as he deals with Israel, but a host of foreign policy issues, from Europe to Russia and to ISIS. CBN News international correspondent Gary Lane discussed these topics with CBN senior reporter Dale Hurd and retired General Jerry Boykin, now with the Family Research Council.
General Boykin, one of the things that people are saying is that they are looking for strong leadership. Apparently they feel that's been lacking. What is it that they want?
Well, I think that they want a decisive leader. I think they wanted a leader that will listen to the subordinates. So in the case of, for example, our military, I think what our military wants is a commander-in-chief that will take their advice. Ultimately, the decision is his. Unfortunately, the current commander-in-chief has basically ignored his generals and his admirals, and I think that what the next president has to do is he has to put in new leadership and then let them be part of solving problems and developing a global strategy.
Donald Trump once said that he knows more about ISIS than the generals do. What about ISIS?
On the 3rd of October, a group of 130 of us, mostly retired generals and admirals, but we had other ranks as well, met with Trump up in Washington to talk about just this issue. And he gave us a pledge that he will not only bring in new leadership in our military, he would listen to them, he would task them to develop a strategy that he would approve and then give them everything they needed to execute that strategy. That's what we wanted to hear from him.
I want to talk to you more about that in a moment, but Dale, how about Europe? What are they looking for in an American president?
They're looking for Hillary Clinton. That's who they're looking for. Trump is a disruptor. You know, I think of Trump as a Reagan-esque figure in the sense that, you know, Reagan came along after other presidents had tried to make deals with the Soviets, and he said, no, I'm not going to play ball anymore. I'm going to challenge the Soviet Union. And I think Trump, in the same way, will be a disruptor and challenge the European Union and challenge this globalist idea in Europe.
General Boykin, tell me about Syria, the Russians. This president has taken them on a bit. We don't have any talks with them right now to end that war in Syria. How would Trump be different?
I think that Trump is very serious about dealing with the Russians. We hear all the campaign rhetoric about Trump being a friend of Vladimir Putin. That's not true, and I think that he'll take a very realistic approach to dealing with Putin. The answer is ultimately not war, but the answer is standing up to him in many of these places, like Syria, where he has expanded his influence because he has a long-term strategic plan. That's where we come back to the lack of a plan for America. No strategy. Therefore, Putin is exploiting the fact that we don't really have a strategy in the Middle East in general, but we don't have a strategy with ISIS and the global jihad network.
Let me ask you, because you covered the Cold War, are you concerned at all that Trump's, what's called his isolationism, will create some kind of vacuum and tempt Putin?
He wants to secure the border and stop the flow of immigrants to a certain extent. I'm sure he'll allow some in, but those that will be of value to the society, not those who want to change it. and also those who will not threaten the society. But I don't really see him being isolationist. I know they fear that, don't they? I'm sure you've heard a lot of that in Europe when you travel around.
In my opinion, you stand up to the Russians, you tend to prevent accidents in Europe.
Yeah.
Will Trump do that?
Yes, I think Trump will stand up to the Russians, and
General, what can you do short of war, though?
So what do we do? I think there are a variety of things that we can do to stand up to the Russians, not the least of which is behind closed doors diplomacy to let the Russians know after the 20th of January that there's a new man on the block.
Coming up, Israel's new state-of-the-art archaeology museum is bringing the Bible to life. When we come back. Interest in the history of the Holy Land is at an all-time high. Soon, visitors to Jerusalem will be able to see not only the ancient artifacts, but also the science behind their discovery. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl shows us how archaeology helps bring the Bible to life.
This unique facility spreads across nearly 9 acres, giving visitors a true glimpse of the immensity of the history discovered throughout the land.
In this huge campus, we want to exhibit all the antiquities that were found in Israel all over the generations, and also the research, how we are making all of the research and publishing what we are finding in archaeological excavation.
From the street, this 10-story building is mostly hidden from view. That's because the idea was to build it in layers downward like an archaeological dig.
The public will come to the roof, not at the bottom. And from the roof, which is level 0, it will go level by level from 1 until 10 levels in the building. And above it, there is a huge canopy, like the shelters that we are building about our archaeological excavations.
At a special dedication ceremony, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the facility and its timing for proving the history of the Jewish people here.
This campus gives us an overwhelming answer to those who try to deny, debate, or erase our history in our land.
Antiquities Director Israel Hasson says it provides visitors a connection to history through the archaeological process.
At this time, when all around us, others are smashing and breaking and destroying history and symbols, here we are, building this building with the intention of empowering the human historical heritage.
The goal is to present both the beauty and story behind these ancient pieces, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are housed next door in the Israel Museum.
We want to show the public, and also children, what's the meaning of the scrolls, how they made it, from which material, what was the process of the Jewish alphabetic that was used in the scrolls.
Lab work will be on full display, and visitors can zoom in for a closer look through cameras. Visitors can also see just how challenging the work is by trying their hand at putting scroll fragments together at this interactive exhibit. In the field, there's a lot of work going on, with about 300 excavations happening each year.
Israel is very small, 22,000 square kilometers. In it, we have declared so far 30,000 archaeological sites, which means that every square kilometer we have more than one archaeological site, which means that most of Israel is one big archaeological site.
That includes all of Jerusalem and most of Tel Aviv.
Density like this not exists, not in Egypt, not in Italy, not in Greece, not in Jordan, not anywhere, only in our country, because it's the Holy Land. It's a kind of core for everything.
The campus should open to the public next year, so visitors can come away with a greater understanding of the heritage and history of this land. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Up next, find out more about the plight of Middle East Christians and what can be done to help. Thousands of Middle East Christians have suffered at the hands of radical Islamic groups like ISIS. CBN News international correspondent Gary Lane spoke with Juliana Tamarazi of the Iraqi Christian Relief Council about their situation and what can be done to help.
Juliana, can you describe the plight of Iraqi Christians in Turkey right now?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. The process is this way, that UNHCR interviews these individuals, and then until the visa comes where they can relocate or resettle elsewhere in the West, they're pushed into these small Islamic villages. And as soon as they are transported from Ankara or from Istanbul into these small villages, they're forced to live in slums, and they have to hide their Christianity. They're unable to profess their faith. They cannot wear their crosses openly. Otherwise, they will not be fed by Muslim charities or even at mosques because they're not allowed to work in these smaller villages. So they have to be at the mercy of Muslims. And once they're discovered, they're evacuated or they're evicted from the slums that they're living in. So a lot of these people are tremendously suffering for the second time for their faith, once in Iraq under ISIS and now in Turkey, especially after the failed coup of Erdogan.
What are the prospects of some of them immigrating to another country and right here in the United States, maybe?
Well, coming to the United States is very difficult because Obama administration really does not allow too many Christians to come here. And there have been, the persecution of Christians in the modern times really began in 2003 with the Islamic State rising, especially in 2006. So many of them are still trapped in Turkey, if you believe it, since 2004, 2005. And especially now, with all the restrictions that have been applied in the United States, not many are able to migrate. So many of them wait for years. And those, within the last few months, Turkey has allowed some of them to work, but they're forced to work in garment industry. Many of them pull long hours, overtime, which they don't get paid for. And on average, the income for those who are able to work in Istanbul, on average is about $150 to $200. And Gary, the rent is about $500 in Istanbul. So you can imagine the poverty level.
Oh, it's terrible. And why do you think the State Department and the Obama administration is not allowing more of these Christians in?
They are not allowing them to enter, I think, because there is that facade that the administration wants to put forth that they're not friendly to the Christian cause. And they really have, I think, showed that very vividly by allowing more Muslims to come to the United States than Christians.
And Juliana, I've had some of them tell me when they've applied for visas, it's Muslims who are actually making the decision. What do you know about that?
There is a very high number of Muslims working in this administration and working in the UNHCR, and obviously they will take care of their own. And to me, I'm someone who escaped Iran due to religious harassment. I'm a former refugee myself, and I see this migration to the West as a form of Islamization of the West, of Europe and the United States. And frankly, it is happening right in front of my eyes. And if the Americans really don't rise up and really see the truth of what is behind all these plans, we will see a completely different United States very soon.
What about the response of the U.S. Church?
The U.S. Church is slowly waking up, and I'm telling you, it's just slowly, unfortunately. There have been some churches that have invited us. They have extended their help, whether it's financial, whether it's prayer. But truly, this is such a monumental situation that we really need more churches to wake up. Some churches tell us that, are you really Christians? Are you culturally Christian, or are you true Christians? And my answer to them is, if these people are dying for Jesus Christ and they have faith that they were saved by the blood of Jesus, who am I to ask if they were baptized as children or if they're baptized as adults? And that is something that we have to really understand about the Eastern Church. Christianity is a Middle Eastern religion, Gary. It is not a Western religion. It's not a European religion. And we have to fight to keep the Christianity inside the Middle East. And really, truly, many of them, that's what they want. They want to return to their homes. And my organization, Iraqi Christian Relief Council, has been doing this work for the last 9 years, traveling throughout the country, educating the Americans. And now, because the situation is so dire in Turkey, we have started fundraising heavily for Turkey. We're trying to raise, by Monday the 17th, $50,000 to help feed 1,000 families. And this is a plea to the Christian church, to the people in the pew, to really open their hearts, pray, and give so we can help some of the suffering body of Christ in Turkey.
What do you and the others want Christians in the West to do?
Please visit victimsofisis.org and really spread the word, because if we don't talk to our fellow Americans, our fellow Christians in our churches, and if we don't pray unitedly for the body of Christ, truly, Gary, the Middle East is going to be empty from Christians and from the Assyrians that are really children of Nineveh.
Up next, the story of one Syrian refugee child and how they found hope from a Christian group in Lebanon. The Syrian civil war has displaced millions of Syrians from their homes. Many of those refugees fled to Jordan, Turkey, and to the neighboring country of Lebanon. Here's the story of one boy who, along with his family, fled for their lives and found a new life.
When the Syrian civil war came to the city of Homs, thousands were forced to run for their lives. Naji and his family fled to a refugee camp in southern Lebanon. When I went to the camp, Naji's aunt told me about how his father died of a chronic heart condition soon after making it to Lebanon. Later, his mother abandoned him and his siblings.
Naji has really suffered. He's been very angry and sad.
When Heart for Lebanon, which is supported by CBN, went to Naji's camp, we invited him to come to the Hope Center. Here, he's learning English, Arabic, and math.
I feel really happy going to school now. The teachers treat me nice, and I've made a lot of friends. It is like I have a big family.
We show Superbook in Arabic at the school so the kids can have some fun while learning about Jesus Christ.
I love Jesus because he came down from heaven and forgave my sins. Every time I want to do a bad thing, Jesus comes into my mind and tells me not to do it. He's always with me.
We also give food to Naji's family and thousands of other refugees. They all get rice, beans, canned meat, cleansers, and other household supplies. Every month, it's enough to keep a family of 6 going.
We really love Heart for Lebanon and CBN. You have done so much for us. We have enough food to feed our family and clean water to drink. Thank you so very much.
We even had a special surprise for Naji, a brand new bike.
I thought I was dreaming. I couldn't believe I would ever have a bicycle. It is so beautiful. I want to thank you for your kind hearts. Everything I have is from Heart for Lebanon and CBN. I love you so much.
That's one of the good news stories coming out of the Middle East, and a reminder to pray for the peoples of the region. That's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.